He survived October 7th, defending his own kibbutz as Hamas militants closed in. Allegations behind closed doors and a sudden resignation from one of the most powerful operational positions in the IDF. Brigadier General Yisrael Shomer has resigned, not from battle, from an investigation into his own conduct. One of the Army's most senior officers, a rising star in Israel's military command, he rose to command the IDF's entire Operations Division, at the center of Israel's wars on multiple fronts, and then a sudden resignation from his position. One of Israel's most senior military commanders has resigned, or as reports say, been forced out, after being questioned by military police over allegations of misconduct involving a subordinate officer. Brigadier General Yisrael Shomer, head of the Israel Defense Forces Operations Division, stepped down following several hours of questioning by the Military Police Criminal Investigation Division. According to Israeli media reports, investigators examined allegations that Shomer had engaged in a consensual relationship with an officer who served under his command, raising concerns over ethical and institutional violations. The military announced that Major General Itzik Cohen, head of the Operations Directorate, had accepted Shomer's request to retire from military service for what it described as personal reasons. However, reports said Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir had been preparing to suspend Shomer following the investigation before the officer submitted his resignation. Shomer's departure marks a dramatic end to the career of an officer widely regarded as one of the military's most experienced operational commanders. As head of the Operations Division, he oversaw planning and coordination of IDF activities across multiple fronts and was considered a potential candidate for future promotion to the rank of Major General. The resignation comes at a particularly sensitive moment for the Israeli military as it continues operations across several regional theaters. Shomer was previously questioned by military police in 2015 when he was commander of the Binyamin Brigade, over an incident in which he shot and killed Palestinian teenager Mohammed Hani al-Kosba. The teenager had thrown a rock at Shomer's jeep and then tried to flee. The case against Shomer was closed nearly a year later, in 2016. Investigators found that Shomer had fired while in motion rather than from a stationary position, and that the inaccurate fire led to the Palestinian teenager's death. Shomer's military career spans decades. He began his service in the Nahal Brigade and later held a series of senior command positions, including commander of the Nahal Brigade and head of the Hamapatz Division. During the Hamas-led October 7th attack in 2023, Shomer was at his home in Kibbutz Kfar Aza when militants infiltrated the community. According to Israeli reports, he joined local defense efforts alongside soldiers responding to the assault. His resignation leaves a vacancy at the heart of the IDF's command structure and adds to growing scrutiny of conduct and accountability among Israel's senior military leadership. Three years into a war with no clear end, Israel's military went to Parliament on May 20th with a number it could no longer afford to ignore. 80,000 draft evaders, possibly 90,000, and rising. Brigadier General Shai Tayeb, head of the IDF's Personnel Planning Branch, told the Knesset's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee that the military was already short 12,000 soldiers.
We are soon expected to reach around 80,000 to 90,000 draft evaders. There was a need for 12,000 soldiers to fill the manpower gap. Ahead of January 2027, when the first soldiers who enlisted for only 30 months of service will be discharged, this gap is expected to widen to around 17,000 soldiers.
The committee was hearing this as part of renewed debates over the Haredi draft bill, legislation that critics argue was written to appease ultra-Orthodox coalition partners rather than actually put more soldiers in uniform. A bloc of coalition lawmakers had already said publicly they would not support it for that reason.
While IDF soldiers are facing north toward Hezbollah, the government is stabbing them in the back by passing the despicable draft-dodging law.
The bill's revival had everything to do with Netanyahu's political position and very little to do with the manpower crisis. His coalition began unraveling after he told the ultra-Orthodox parties Shas and United Torah Judaism that the legislation lacked enough votes to pass. Both parties responded by pushing to dissolve the Knesset and move elections forward from October 27th. Bringing the bill back to committee was Netanyahu's attempt to talk them out of it. It was not working. Senior Degel HaTorah figures reconvened on May 18th and confirmed their position was unchanged. They wanted the Knesset dissolved, with elections in September, ahead of the High Holy Days, when ultra-Orthodox turnout traditionally peaks. Opposition leader Yair Lapid, perhaps sensing an opportunity for himself, was already sharpening his response, directing his warnings squarely at Likud members considering falling in line.
We will buy billboards all across the state of Israel, and if you support this law on every corner of the country, there will be a sign with your face on it, and underneath it will be written, "Supported draft evasion from the IDF during wartime."
Back in March, the IDF Chief of Staff told a cabinet meeting he was raising 10 red flags and warned the military could collapse without a solution. As of May 20th, the politicians were still arguing about the bill. On April 28th, a protest in Israel crossed a line that even senior officials called unprecedented. Ultra-Orthodox extremists, members of a hardline faction known as the Jerusalem faction, broke into the backyard of the home of Israel's military police chief, Brigadier General Yuval Yamin, in the southern city of Ashkelon. His family was inside. Police said the rioters trespassed into the yard, acted violently, and disrupted the routine of life in the area. 25 people were arrested, among them minors. But this was not an isolated incident. It was the boiling point of a years-long standoff between the Israeli state and a community that has, for decades, been largely exempt from mandatory military service. The Jerusalem faction, a group of roughly 60,000 ultra-Orthodox members, had called its followers to the streets in response to the arrest of a yeshiva student named Nehorai Bachar, who was detained from within the walls of a yeshiva in Herzliya and taken to military prison. The faction's spiritual leader, Rabbi Azriel Auerbach, declared,
"It is an absolute obligation for every person who values the Torah to protest its degradation and desecration."
And protest they did. Demonstrators blocked Route 4 near the central city of Bnei Brak. Israeli flags were burned. A fake tombstone was displayed on the highway, carrying the words that have become something of a rallying cry at these demonstrations.
"We will die and not enlist."
One demonstrator screamed on the highway, and his words captured the mood of the crowd.
"We prefer to die as Haredim rather than live as IDF soldiers."
For context, roughly 80,000 ultra-Orthodox men between the ages of 18 and 24 are currently believed to be eligible for military service but have not enlisted. The Israeli military says it urgently needs 12,000 new recruits, mostly combat troops, because of the enormous strain the country's recent conflicts have placed on both standing and reserve forces. In 2024, Israel's High Court of Justice ruled that the blanket exemptions historically granted to full-time Haredi yeshiva students were illegal. Since then, the military has issued tens of thousands of enlistment orders, and a growing number of ultra-Orthodox men have been formally classified as draft dodgers. The Jerusalem faction responded to Tuesday's condemnations with words that made their position clear.
"Red lines have been crossed. Leave the Torah students alone."
The reaction from Israel's top officials was swift and notably unified, at least in tone. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a statement saying,
"I strongly condemn the unbridled and violent attack against the chief military police officer and demand that firm action be taken against those involved."
Defense Minister Israel Katz went further, saying he strongly condemns the deliberate break-in at the home of the chief military police officer.
This involves a group of violent criminals with whom the full severity of the law must be enforced. I stand behind Colonel Yuval Yamin and clarify. We will not allow harm to IDF commanders and soldiers.
Israel Police Commissioner Danny Levy ordered what he called determined and immediate action, saying that while people have every right to protest, that right does not extend to trespassing, violence, or threatening family members. His forces, he said, were already working to locate and arrest those involved. Meanwhile, Israel's Supreme Court, just days earlier, had ordered the government to strip welfare benefits from ultra-Orthodox draft dodgers and called the police's failure to arrest such individuals unacceptable, describing the situation as a knowing and ongoing mass violation of the law.